To Kill a Mockingbird, Chapter 2. This is the 13th video. We ended our last video with Scout, Jean, right? Trying to explain to the teacher why Cunningham couldn't get the quarter from her, right? I beg your pardon, Jean Louise? That's okay, ma'am. You get to know all the country folks after a while. The Cunninghams never took anything they can't pay back. No church baskets and no script stamps. Script stamps, something very specific, very cultural here. What is it? It's paper money of small denominations, less than $1, issued for temporary emergency use. Okay, so it's a moment everybody is using coins, right? Because nobody has a lot of money. I believe if somebody had $100 bill, then it would be, the person would be millionaire at that time. And then of course everybody would use small coins, and then you can guess that more coins were needed, you know, and the government couldn't, you know, just produce them. And then they issued these script stamps. Okay, I put a very nice picture there. One for 1 cent, the other for 5 cents, and the other for 10 cents. On it, it's written U.S. food stamp, unauthorized use punishable by law, United States of America. Let me see, where am I? Okay, so the Cunninghams never took anything they can't pay back. No church baskets and no script stamps. They never took anything off of anybody. They get along on what they have. They don't have much, but they get along on it. This is a Scout saying, right? My special knowledge of the Cunningham tribe, one branch that is, was gained from events of last winter. Walter's father was one of Atticus's clients. After a dreary conversation in our living room one night about his entailment, before Mr. Cunningham left, he said, "Mr. Finch, I don't know when I'll ever be able to pay you." First, remember that dreary is sad, you know, dark. In that case, it's sad, and conversation where people would be down, right? And then he had an entailment. I think we have talked about entailment before, I'm not completely sure, but let me read the definition. And I put a very nice picture of a boy that is very dreary because it's raining outside, you know, so he is sad and he's bored, a little bit depressed, right? Well, what is an entailment? The act of entailing or of giving as an estate and directing the mode of descent, meaning that I die and then I leave my property, you know, my possessions to my kids. In this case, Walter Cunningham's is mostly likely in a dispute over who is the rightful heir to a piece of property. So I imagine, I know, his father or an uncle or somebody died, and somebody wants to take the property from him, right? Saying that this person has the right to inherit the property, right? And then of course he needs a lawyer, you know. So after a dreary conversation in our living room one night about his entailment, before Mr. Cunningham left, he said, "Mr. Finch, I don't know when I'll ever be able to pay you." "Let that be the least of your worries, Walter," Atticus said. When I asked Jim what entailment was, and Jim described it as a condition of having your tail in a crack, I asked Atticus if Mr. Cunningham's would ever pay us. Of course, Jim has no idea of what an entailment is, or he's just making fun of Scout, right? So you have your tail in a difficult situation, in a crack, right? So that's an entailment, according to Jim. So Jim asked if, Walter would ever pay them. I asked Atticus if Mr. Cunningham's would ever pay us. Not in money, Atticus said, but before the year's out, I'll have been paid. You watch. We watched. One morning, Jim and I found a load of stove wood in the backyard. Later, a sack of hickory nuts appeared on the back step. I put a picture there, I think, of hickory, the tree and the nut, right? Well, it's a kind of nut. In Portuguese we call it nogueira. Okay. So one day, a load of stove wood, and then later a sack of hickory nuts appeared on the back steps. With Christmas came a crate of smilax and holly. Sorry, I mispronounced it. Is smilax, all right? Smilax. A smilax, I put a picture there. It's a kind of berry. I've never tried it. I had never seen it in my life before reading the book, but I guess it must be common over there. And holly is another kind of red berry. By the way, that's why we have Hollywood, right? Hollywood is not holy wood. It's not something sacred. Hollywood is the woods, like a wooded area full of holly trees, right? So, and crate, it's like a box, okay? A specific kind of box, usually those boxes. When you go to the grocery store, to the green grocery store, and you buy a lot of things, they have those wooden box, that would be a crate, okay? So the crate was full of smilax. That's how you pronounced it. I put the phonetical transcript there for you to help you out. Sorry, I said smilax. Smilax, okay? Let's try again, and hopefully we'll know how to pronounce it into the end of this video. Smilax, all right? Smilax. That's the little. Okay. So later, a sack of hickory nuts appeared. With Christmas came a crate, a box of smilax and holly. That spring, when we found a croker sack full of turnip greens, Atticus said Mr. Cunningham had more than paid him. Well, what do we need? A crate, I've already told you. Croker sack. It's a large sack made from loosely woven coarse material, like the material we would have in Brazil. We don't anymore, right? But in the past, people would have to carry potatoes, for example. Things like that. Nowadays, we don't use fabric anymore because plastic is extremely cheap, right? So we have to imagine, I don't know, beginning of the 20th century. I imagine after that, plastic became more and more cheaper and cheaper, right? And then of course people would prefer, even people in the middle of the countryside would prefer plastic, than using even the cheapest fabric, right? But remember, plastic is a very recent invention. Okay, so they found a croker sack full of turnip greens. I put there the picture of some turnip greens, similar to radish. Not so similar, but it's in the family of radish. Okay. Atticus said Mr. Cunningham had more than paid us. Why does he pay you like that? I asked. Because that's the only way he can pay me. He has no money. Are we poor, Atticus? Atticus nodded. We are indeed. Jam's nose wrinkled. Are we as poor as the Cunninghams? Not exactly. The Cunninghams are country folks, farmers, and the cash hit them hardest. Atticus, do we have time for this paragraph? Yes. Atticus said professional people were poor because the farmers were poor. And that's a truth about the Great Depression, okay? Atticus said professional people were poor because the farmers were poor. As Macomb County was a farm county, nickels and dimes were hard to come by for doctors and dentists and lawyers. Entailment was only a part of Mr. Cunningham's vexations. I mean, his problems, right? Entailments, vexations. The acres not entailed were mortgaged to the hilt, and the little cash he made went to interest. Well, let's go by parts because we have to talk about financial market here. First, if you watch movies and series in English, you know about mortgage, right? What is mortgage? Let me read the definition and then let's talk about it. A specific type of loan that is used to buy real estate. Yeah, for sure. Or a loan you get using your property as guarantee. You know, basically, you will get the loan. If you don't pay it, you lose your house. Okay, so that's mortgage. Now think about it. Let's imagine I get $100,000. No, that would be too much for that time. I get $1,000, right, from the bank. Do you think after a year I will pay $1,000? Of course not. There will be the growing, let's put it this way, of the money, and we call this growing interest. Okay, so interest is, for example, if you owe the credit card, the interest is so high that it's revolting. Okay. What else do I have to tell you? No, that's okay. So let me just read it one more time. The acres not entailed or not in a dispute of a family inheritance was mortgage. I have two pronunciations, that's why I looked here, because it's possible to pronounce mortgage, right? Mortgage, or like the pronunciation I put in our Quizlet, you know, that is mortgage, right? Mortgage. Mortgage. I believe mortgage is much more common, mainly in the United States. I don't know about the UK. Mortgage, you know, sounds much more common. Okay, so mortgage to the hilt, and the little cash he made went to interest. So he made cash just to pay the interest of his mortgage. If he held his mouth right, Mr. Cunningham could get a WPA job, but his land would go to ruin if he left it, and he was willing to go hungry to keep his land and vote as he pleased. Mr. Cunningham's, said Atticus, came from a set breed of men.